So technically, in this unit, we are going to talk about three broad aspects. The first one is the design of purlin, which is also called as purlin design. And the second one is the design of truss. And the last one is the design of welded gantry girder. So along with this, there is also some certain kind of theoretical data that is also involved here. So we'll discuss the theoretical concepts as well as the design oriented problems regarding all these three process, that is purlin design, truss design and gantry girder design. Okay, again here gantry girder is also designed by using the welded connection as we have done in the plate girder. Okay, so today's class and the next three classes will be focusing on the design of purlins. So this I'll discuss first. Then I'll go for the talking on the design of gantry girder, and in the end I'll talk about the truss design or the design process of truss. So usually all these three elements or all the three structures, that is purlin, truss and gantry girder, they are all called as an industrial structures. Okay, you have certain kind of industrial structures. Among the different types of industrial structures which are available for us, purlins, trusses and gantry girders are majorly are commonly seen industrial structures. Again, the purlin and truss, they both are in the same element or the same component of a structure. So purlins are the elements which are available in trusses. So truss actually is a combination of different types of elements like purlins. Purlins is also one of the element which you must provide when you are designing the truss. So you must have heard about two different names, but that is purlins and rafters, RAFTERS. So purlins are one such components in a truss which are to be very carefully designed in order to ensure the safety of the truss. So however, you don't have the rafter design methods, this rafter process is not available for you. So we are not going to discuss much about the rafter, but however, I'll let you know what is rafter when we are discussing about the purlins. Okay, fine. So this is all about what we are going to discuss in the coming classes. So everything regarding to the purlins. Okay, fine. So coming to the introduction to the purlin, a purlin is a longitudinal member. Okay, it is a longitudinal structural member in a roof or in a roof truss, you can say. So it is not just roof, it is a roof truss. Now here if you see the structure in the figure, if you see the structure is made up of wood, not steel. Okay, so that means you might have the purlins which are made by using wood, which are also made by using steel. So you have two types of purlins based on the material. One is wooden purlin and the second one is the steel purlin. Okay, now the thing is, which one in this element is called as a purlin? So as the definition of the purlin, if you look at, a purlin is a longitudinal structural member or horizontal structural member. So it is more or less like a beam in a truss. Okay, so a longitudinal structural member which is in a roof truss is called as a purlin. Now in this figure you have two major components. One is the vertical component, which is this one, and the second one is the horizontal component, which is this one. Okay, so whatever the horizontal components that are available in the truss, they are called as purlins. Okay, and whatever the vertical components that you are seeing in the truss, they are called as rafters. Okay, so this is called as purlin, and this is also a purlin, and the vertical one, this one is called as rafter. Okay, I'll show you more detail in the next figure. Okay, this is about a purlin. So your objective is to design this purlin. Okay, you can say that, sir, it's a very simple element. Why cannot we just take an wood of standard sizes or standard dimensions? Why cannot we place out throughout the entire structure? If it is a wooden purlin, yes, that could be the appropriate process. But if it's a steel purlin, you have to take care of which shape of the element has to be used and what is its strength, is it perfect or not. All these elements has to be considered. So generally, wooden purlins are the purlins which are used in olden days. Nowadays, whatever the industrial structures which you are constructing, all the industrial structures consist of steel purlins only. So that's the reason why we have to focus more detailed on the design of purlins. Okay, fine. Now let's also talk about much internal details of purlins. So as far as possible, purlins should be located on panel points at top chord members. So when we are discussing about the roof trusses, I'll talk about the top chord members and bottom chord members. But for time being, you remember you have a truss element like this. Okay, you have a simple truss element in this way. Okay, so the top chord members are the members which are the top of the structure. So this entire portion is called as top chord member, and the one which is there at the bottom or which is resting, that is called as bottom chord members. Okay, so top chord and bottom chord members. Now the thing is where you should provide the purlin. So as far as possible, purlin should be located on panel points of top chord members. That means you have to provide the purlins with respect to the top chord members. So as I was telling, you have to provide the purlins in an horizontal direction. So these are all purlins if you provide. So these ensure additional safety to the member. So that's the reason why they are provided at panel points. Now the question is, what is panel points? So panel point is a point. Suppose if you are providing the purlins in this way. Okay, say for example, you have provided the purlins, and then you have the rafters. Okay, this section, one individual section, let me draw that one. So one individual section of a truss is called as panel. So this is one panel, this is another panel. So likewise, you have a number of panels in a truss. So as far as possible, you should provide the purlins at the panel points of top chord members. Okay, so that's about the purlins inclusion in the roof trusses. And generally, the spacing of the purlins varies from 1.35 meters to 2 meters. This is the usual value or the typical values of spacing of purlins. That means if you are providing purlins, the spacing should be 1.35 to 2 meters. This would be the appropriate range for any kind of structures. So it applies to steel purlins only. Okay, again, wooden purlins means you have to decrease this length, because wood doesn't have high amounts of strength when you compare with the steel element. So that's the reason why in wooden purlins, the spacing of the purlins will get reduced. Okay, so fine. Whatever we are discussing, we'll be discussing with respect to steel purlins only. And then you have three different shapes of purlins. Okay, one is the channel section purlin, second one is I-shaped purlin, and the third one is angle purlins. These are the three typically available shapes of purlins. I'll let you know about this. So angle purlins are used for smaller spacing of trusses. That is, the trusses of span 3 to 4 meters, you can use angle shaped purlins. And for medium spacing, that is from 4 to 5 meters, you can use channel sections as purlins. And more than 5 meters of span, you should go for the selection of I-section purlins. Okay, so this is the range. So angle section purlins are used when you have the span of the truss in between 3 to 4 meters. This is the typical value again. Okay, the channel sections are used when you have the span ranging between 4 to 5 meters, and any span which is exceeding greater than 5 meters, you should go for the selection of I-section purlins. Okay, so that's about the different types of different shapes of purlins and where you can use based on the span of the truss. Okay, now as I was telling, the shapes of the purlins, we have three shapes. One is I-section purlin or I-shaped purlin, channel shaped purlin or channel section purlin, and the last one is angle section purlin or angle purlin. Okay, so as you see in the figure, you can clearly see that the purlins and rafters. So the purlins are the horizontal members which are there in the roof truss, and the rafters are the vertical members which are provided in the roof truss. So this entire portion is the rafter. Okay, I was talking about the panel points, right? So this section is called as panel point. I'll draw with another color so that you can differentiate. So this section is called as panel point. So this is also panel point. So you have innumerable panel points based on the length and width of the truss, or based on the area of the truss. So this is what, in simple terms, the purlins and the rafters are. So you don't need to focus much on rafters portion. We'll be focusing much on purlins portion. Okay. So I was also telling that the top chord and bottom chord members. So this portion is called as the bottom chord member. Okay. This is the entire portion is bottom chord member. So here you don't have the top chord member. The top chord member is available in this way. Okay. This is the top chord member. Okay. I'll talk much detail about the components of roof trusses about these rafters and purlins, or top chord and bottom chord members. Anyways, now the question is, how do you orient the purlins? So the orientation is very important when it comes to the design of purlins. It is not that you have selected a roof truss and you have provided the purlin. It is mandatory to ensure the safety of the purlins. In order to ensure the safety of the purlins, you have to be very careful along which direction you have to orient the purlins. What, right? So I'll show you a couple of figures which talks about the orientation in a very detailed way. Yeah, so this is the first figure. So in this figure, if you check down, this entire portion is the rafter. Okay, consider it as a rafter. And this channel section, angle section, this entire portion is the purlin. Okay, so the channel and angle sections which you are seeing are purlins. Now the question is, here it is clearly said that it is not recommended. Let's see why it is not recommended. Now suppose you know that the inclination is along this direction, along the downward direction. Now the basic idea is, suppose you have a inclination and you are trying to roll a ball, right? So you don't need to apply extra push when you want to roll down the ball, right? When you want to roll up the ball, you have to give some extra push. Now you have placed the angle shaped purlin here. Okay. Now the question is where you have to provide the support to this purlin, right? So now let's see where you can provide the support. Suppose if you provide the support here, say for example, you have given some bolted connection or welded connection there, and you with some consigns you can say that this connection is not going to be a proper connection. Why? Because you know that the purlin will flow along this direction, along the downward direction. Your main aim is to give support or give stiffness to the member. So if you provide the support along the top end, there is a higher chance that the purlin will still get rolled down towards the bottom portion of the member. So what you have to do is, the appropriate position for this is, you have to provide the support here, so that this support or this connection, it can be a welded or bolted connection, this connection will stop the purlin to not roll down to the bottom portion of the member or bottom portion of the truss or rafter, whatever it is. Okay, so that's the correct orientation. So the reason why it is not recommended is, they have provided the channel shaped purlin, but what they have done was, they have placed the misplaced the connection. Okay, they have provided on the back top. So the connection should be here. Okay, again, there is one more hidden detail in this. I'll talk about that a little later. And again, if you see the angle section purlin also, this is also not the appropriate place, because there is a chance that this portion of the purlin will get bent in this way, right? So if it is getting bent, then obviously you find some difficulty in safety of the structure. So this is one thing with respect to the support. The second thing with respect to the safety of the member is how to orient the channel sections and angle sections in a purlin. So that you have to be very careful. I'll show you another figure for this. Yeah. So here you can see. So think about only the channel section as of now. Okay, so you observe the key difference between the channel section in the figure 2 and in the figure 1. Okay, in the figure 2, the channel section, the main phase or the longest phase of the channel section should be along the downward direction. Okay, the longest phase should be along the downward direction. So this you can observe here. Okay, the reason why you have to provide it so. Suppose, say for example, it is very quite common that certain amount of forces will be exhibiting on the member. So suppose, say for example, P kilonewtons of load is acting on the top flange of the channel section. So it is quite sure that this portion, that is the top flange portion of the channel purlin or the channel section, will tend to bend. This portion will, however, not bend. It is because it has enough amount of support. So when you have enough amount of support, obviously that doesn't get bent. So here, if you observe in the figure 1, even though if you try to apply certain amount of load on the member, what happens is, since the longest edge is facing towards the downstream portion of the rafter, it carries certain amount of strength. Okay, so that's how you have to orient the channel section purlin. So similarly, when you look at the angle shaped purlin, okay, you look at the angle shaped purlin. So the purlin is placed in this way in both the figures, just a mirror image of this particular figure. Okay, now what is the key aspect here? So here, if you see, the angle purlin or the angle connection is given at the portion where you have highest amount of bending, where you can expect the failure of the member. So if you provide the angle section towards the downstream end, such that even if certain amount of load is acting on the member, this angle section or the main angle section, whichever is there, that it does not get failed. Okay, that's how the orientation of the channel section purlins and angle section purlins, and also its connections has to be designed. Now, the next aspect is the I section purlins. I section purlin you can provide as you wish, because you can invert the top portion to the bottom portion, bottom portion to the top portion. That's up to you. Again, it has some limitations, but however, when you are providing I section purlins, you have to provide the connection, that is this one. You have to provide the connection in such a way that along this side, the connection should be there. You should not provide the connection along this side. So this is incorrect. Okay. So that's how the orientation of purlins comes down with respect to the safety of the purlins. Okay. I hope it is clear which one is recommended and which one is not recommended. What are the reasons for recommendation and what are the reasons for not recommendation? Okay, fine. Now let's see at the design procedure of purlins. I want everyone to write down whatever you are seeing on the slides. Make sure you are writing down the things. Okay, so here in the design procedure of purlins, you have 8 to 10 steps that are available for you. For this design procedure is commonly adopted for the 3 types of purlins, that is channel section, I section, and angle section. So we'll be discussing the 3 types individually. So we'll solve each individual design problem on all the 3 types. Anyways, so let's look at the design procedure. So for designing of purlins, the first and foremost data is they will give the spacing of the purlins, they will give the spacing of the trusses, they'll give at what angle you have to provide the rafters, at what angle you have to provide the purlins. This data, basic data, they will provide. So by using the basic data, and in the basic data, they will also talk about the loads that are acting on the purlin, maybe wind loads, dead loads, live loads, snow loads. So they will give different kinds of loads. It depends. Okay. So based on the given data, the first thing which you have to look for is you have to calculate the factored forces. Okay. So you have to calculate the factored forces or for the factored loads. And here the factored loads are again divided into 2 types. One is the load that is acting parallel to the member, and the second one is load that is acting perpendicular to the member. So forget about sheeting. I'll talk about that a little later. So this is the first step. So you have to find out the factored loads that are acting parallel to the member and the factored loads that are acting perpendicular to the member. Right? So how does these parallel loads and perpendicular loads are coming? So you have a purlin. Okay. So the loads which are parallel to member is nothing but the loads which are acting in this direction. The loads which are perpendicular to the member is nothing but the loads in the vertical direction. Okay, this is about the parallel and perpendicular. Okay. Now, here they have discussed about one important parameter, that is sheeting. Okay, if you observe any roof truss, it will have a sheeting method. I mean, it will have a cover on the top of the roof truss. That cover is called as sheeting. We are going to use certain kinds of sheet or metal sheets, and hence it is termed as sheeting. So here the sheetings of trusses are broadly in two different ways. One is GI sheetings, okay, and the second one is AC sheetings. What is this GI? It is nothing but galvanized iron sheeting. Okay, you will see the iron sheets. Okay, they are basically called as galvanized iron or GI sheets. Okay, galvanized iron sheeting. AC is nothing but asbestos cement sheeting. Asbestos cement sheeting. So these are typically made up of cement. So they have a combination of cement with fly ash. Sometimes they also use very fine rice husk ash. Sometimes they'll go for the usage of cement in combination with GGBFS, that is ground granulated blast furnace slag. Anyways, that's a different story. So these are the two types of sheetings which you have. Okay, one is the GI sheeting and the second one is asbestos cement sheeting. Okay, they will specifying in the problem which type of sheeting you have to use in order to provide the top cover on the top of roof truss. Okay, just remember you have two types of sheeting. One is galvanized iron sheeting and the second one is asbestos cement sheeting. It is also called as AC sheeting. Fine, this is the first step. And the second step which you have to calculate is the shear forces and bending moments. You have to determine the shear forces and bending moments. Again, the shear forces and bending moments are to be differentiated for parallel to the sheeting and perpendicular to the sheeting. So here remember ZZ axis is nothing but XX axis only. So there is no difference between ZZ and XX axis. Okay. So make sure, don't confuse here. ZZ axis is not the third dimension. It is the second dimension only. I mean, it's a two-dimensional representation only. Okay, fine. So you are going to calculate the bending moments and the shear forces along the ZZ axis and also along the YY axis. So if it's a simply supported beam, the moment values are WL square by 8. Okay, and if it is a for shear force, it is WL by 2. Okay, anyways, I'll talk about these when we are solving problems. So this is the second step. And the third step which you have to solve for is, here you have to look for a section. Okay, you have to select the section. Suppose if they have asked you to design an I section purlin. So initially what you have to do is you were going to select a trial section here. Okay, a trial section is selected. Based on the trial section, you are going to find out the ZPZ value. Okay, I'll write this statement. So what you're going to do is you're going to select the trial section. Okay, so you are going to select a trial section. So initially, say for example, we are designing the I section. So you can look here as ISMB section. So it's better if you select ISMB or ISWB. So most of the times we prefer to select ISMB sections, that is medium weight sections. Okay, so when it comes to the I sections, you try to prefer ISMB sections. If you are not finding the appropriate I sections, then you medium standard sections, then you can go for wide flange beam, that is ISWB sections. Okay, I'll discuss that when we are talking about problem. So the first thing which you have to do is you have to select a trial section. Say for example, I have selected ISMB 700, just an example. So for this, you have to calculate the value of ZPZ. Okay, that is plastic section modulus. Now, when you are calculating the plastic section modulus of a section, okay, so the plastic section modulus which you have calculated, okay, must be less than the ZPZ of section which you selected. Okay. So the ZPZ value which you have calculated must be less than the value of ZPZ of the section which you have selected. Suppose, say for example, for ISMB 700, you have the ZPZ value of, say for example, some random value. Okay, let's say 160 into 10 cube mm cube. Okay, so whatever the ZP value you have calculated, this ZP value which you have calculated must be less than the ZPZ of the section. Now, how do you get the ZPZ values of the section which you have selected? It is obtained from the annexure of IS 800-2007. So we have already discussed that. Now the question is, how do you find out the ZPZ value? So in order to find out the ZPZ value, you have a specific formula for this. So the ZPZ calculation formula for this is, you can use in this way. So please write this formula. So ZPZ equals to, okay, so moment along the Z direction upon Fy into gamma m naught plus 2.5 times of d by b, okay, into my upon Fy into gamma m naught. So here mz and my are the moments along z direction and y direction. D and b are the depth of the section and width of the flange of the section which you have selected. Okay, so then you have to select, you have to find out the value of ZPZ, and the ZPZ value, as I said earlier, the ZPZ value which you have calculated, it must be less than the ZPZ of the section which you have selected. So that's about the calculation of ZPZ value. So if the ZPZ value which you have calculated, you can say it as ZPZ required. Okay, so this value must be less than the ZPZ of section selected. Okay, if it is selected, then you can term it as a safe, and then you should proceed for the next steps. This is the third step. And in the fourth step, what you have to find out is, you have to find out the shear capacity of the section. So this is the next step, shear capacity of the section. Now again, the shear capacity has also to be found out along the Z direction and also along the Y direction. Remember, the shear capacity also to be found out along Z direction as well as along Y direction. So the shear capacity, that is a VDZ, that is a design shear force along Z direction, is calculated using the formula AVZ into Fy by √3 into gamma m naught. That is VDZ. Then again, you also have to calculate the value of VDY, that is design shear force along Y direction. So which is as, instead of AVZ, you have to solve for AVY into Fy by √3 into gamma m naught. So here AVZ and AVY, what is AVZ? AVZ is nothing but the area of a web. Okay, AVZ is nothing but the area of web along Z direction. That is, you can directly take it as height of the section into thickness of the web. And here AVY is nothing but 2 times of area of the flange, that is BF into TF, width of the flange into thickness of the flange. Why 2? Because you have 2 flanges for an I section and also for a channel section. For an angle section, you will have only 1 flange. Okay, it is not technically called as flange, but still. Okay, I'll talk about that. So that's how you're going to find out the shear capacity of the sections along the Z direction and also along the Y direction. So this is the fourth step. And in the fifth step, what you have to find out is the moment capacity. So you have to calculate the moment capacity, or design capacity or moment capacity, they both are same. Again, the design capacity and moment capacity are also calculated along Z direction and also Y direction. So that is MDZ, that is design moment along Z direction. It is calculated as ZPZ into Fy by gamma m naught. And remember, this value must be less than or equals to 1.2 into ZEZ into Fy by gamma m naught. So this is how you should calculate the design moment along Z direction. Similarly, you also have to find out the design moment along Y direction, which is given as ZPZ, sorry, it is not ZPZ, it is ZPY. ZPY into Fy by gamma m naught, which must be less than or equals to 1.5 into ZEY into Fy by gamma m naught. So I'll talk about how do you get this ZPZ, ZPY, ZEZ and ZEY while discussing the problem. Okay. For time being, you just remember the moment has to be calculated along both the directions, that is ZEZ and MDZ and MDY. This is the fifth step. And the next step is you have to check whether the moment values are within the limits or not. So you should check for by using the formula which is called as an interaction formula. What is this interaction formula? You have a formula for this. So that formula is given as mz by mdz plus my by mdy must be less than or equals to 1. Okay, so you have got mdz and mdy values, okay, from here, from step 5, and mz and my you will be getting it from the second step, that is the design moments and shear forces. Mz and my are the moment along z direction and moment along y direction by using WL squared by 8 formula. And the ratio of mz by mdz plus mz by my by mdy must be less than or equals to 1. If it is less than or equals to 1, then the section which you have selected is also safe. And the next step which you have to look for is you have to check for the deflection, right? So this is the 7th step. Fine. So the next step which you have to solve for is you have to check for the deflection. Okay. So you need to check for the deflection based on the table which is specified in IS 800/2007. Again, that table 6 you should refer in order to find out the check for deflection terms. So if you refer table 6 of IS 800/2007, it talks about the deflection limits. Okay, I'll let you know how to take these deflection limits based on the conditions and based on the type of the structure. This is the 7th step. And the last step is you have to check for the wind pressure. So you know that certain amount of winds will also be acting on the truss members. So you also have to look for the design of wind pressure or the check for wind pressure, right? So these are the 8 steps which you have to solve when you are designing a roof truss. It can be a channel section or it can be an I section or a angle section for you. Okay? So this is the entire process. So now let's try to calculate, try to design a purlin, which is an I-shaped purlin, but that you can take it as a first model problem. And then we'll see what are the key changes which you have to make based on the shape of the purlin which you are selecting.